Here's my presentation on how to do an oral presentation in TOK. Wow, lots of words here. Okay, so it's 10 minutes per person. Dress appropriately. You've got to edit the final video so that it ends up being, if there are two people, 20 minutes. If there's one person, 10 minutes. And the final deadline is June 2nd. Submission requirements for the final video of oral TBA. Well, final requirements, I don't know. Keep your eyes open, but don't worry too much. Okay, so figure out what you're doing early. If you postpone, you probably won't do a very good job. This is the assessment criteria. Most students are in the level 2, level 3 area most of the time. In order to get, and we look at this as 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Okay, so to get a 7, you got to be focused on this knowledge question. You've got to have a very specific real life situation. You've got to explore it effectively. You got to make convincing arguments. You got to show different perspectives. You got to talk about what the potential outcomes of the analysis are, and then it goes down to basic level. So there are, just so you know, as is the case with most different things that get done, people tend to fall in the middle. So the first bit, our real life situation. Pick anything that you find interesting. Cultural appropriation is a big one. If you like space travel, the Mars mission is interesting. Aid efforts, people do stuff like that all the time. There's a concrete situation right here in Kenya with the Dadaab camp. So there's lots of things. And if you're wondering what to do, go ahead and ask me, and we'll talk about what you're interested in. You need to come up with a knowledge question from your situation. So generally, you need to explore your situation. You need to think about your situation. You need to find what's in there that can be connected to TOK. If you look at my blog post, the one about the two different recordings of the same piece of music, I had a couple of knowledge questions in there. In order to make a good presentation, I'd have to pick the one knowledge question that I was really importantly interested in and focus on that. Tip. Got that? All right. You need convincing arguments. So you've got to have a knowledge question. You've got to answer that with probably more than one argument. So what tools of analysis can you use? Well, you can use the knowledge frameworks of various areas of knowledge to explore your situation and explain how that evidence supports a particular claim. You could also look at ways of knowing and talk about, for example, how emotion impacts the way people make a certain decision, or how intuition is really important in certain decision making processes. You can use personal examples from your own life. You can use examples from your IB courses. You can use examples from the news. You can use your examples from research that you do. So there's lots of different ways to explore your real life situation and your knowledge question. One kind of cool thing you can do is you look at a real life situation that you find interesting. You come up with a knowledge question. And then from there, you think of other real life situations that can lead to similar knowledge questions. Vox. These guys do a great job with real life situations, with talking about why these situations are important and why the interpretation is important. Please, please, please consider using their videos as models. They're not going to say, my knowledge question is, but they often have implicit knowledge questions. They often explain things in really inventive ways, and they always use evidence. So Vox is a great source for inspiration. By the way, just so you know, on this slide, if you look at it, in Google Classroom, you'll find links to 7 or 8 exemplary presentations from Vox. Go ahead and watch them. You'll probably learn something. All right, different perspectives. So you have your situation. You've extracted a knowledge question from it. You've perhaps added an additional situation. Now, claims and counterclaims as you look at your knowledge question. Why does the claim work? Why doesn't it work? What are other ways to look at these claims? One possible way is to consider how one area of knowledge might look at this particular problem compared to another one. So these are all of these different bullet points can help you to consider different perspectives. All right. Now, it would not be kind to mention the names of the seniors that did these presentations, but here are some unsupported claims that we saw. The stronger the emotion, the stronger the bias towards vaccines. Well, probably true. Very difficult to measure. There's very little evidence supplied in this case that supported that claim. Another one, historical stereotypes of blacks in the US are reinforced in American politics. Well, okay, it's probably true, but one cannot just make the claim and then leave it alone. So, perhaps you're going to talk about the psychology of stereotypes. Perhaps you're going to take the examples that you're using and bring them back to how they reinforced stereotypes. So you have to do more than just say it. You can't just state the claim. You have to provide the evidence and focus on what you're proving. Arts shape public opinion. How do we know? Because movies. Well, that's not evidence. So we need evidence to provide to demonstrate that movies did shape opinion. And then simplistic claims are also issues. People have faith in local healers, and this is indigenous knowledge. Well, probably true. So what? Indigenous knowledge uses emotion and economics uses reason. This is a rather famous, it was a particularly painful example to watch because the students belabored this point without providing any evidence or discussing the knowledge. Which brings us to another issue. If you're going to talk about indigenous knowledge, you have to be very specific about what that knowledge is. The same is true of historical stereotypes. Well, are you talking about history? Are you talking about stereotypes? If you're talking about public opinions, what public opinion are you talking about? How do we know what that public opinion is? These are all knowledge issues that must be discussed in this kind of presentation. Outcomes. This is an essential piece of your presentation. We have to understand why it matters. That is, so what? Why should I care about the issue? Why should other teachers care? Why should your partners care? What do you think? And when you say, what do you think, that means, what do you think as a knower and as a TOK scholar? The best presentations return to the real life situation and the central knowledge question. All right, so you don't have to do it exactly this way, but here's an example. You open up by explaining what happened in the real life situation. There are some guides out there. By guides, we mean you might Google TOK presentation template and they'll give you one, and then it'll say claim, counterclaim, mini conclusion. These tend to be very formulaic, and if you try to plug in a bunch of stuff without really understanding what you're doing or why, it comes off very contrived. So I would avoid these slide guides, except maybe as an opportunity to look at how some people might do it. When you do these live, you can't read a script. In this case, it's going to be really hard to know whether you're reading a script or not. But it should sound natural, and it should. The main reason we say no scripts is because what happens when people read from scripts a lot of times is they copy a bunch of stuff that they don't really understand, and they read it, and it doesn't make any sense. So it goes back to making sense. You don't have to do a slideshow. You can, but I'm not sure what other options are available to you in this case. So for the real one, almost everybody uses slides. If you got a better idea, that's fine. In this case, you're going to have to do something via that involves some images and some sound, which in general means a Google slide presentation that you talk over. But if you have a better idea, that's totally fine. It could be a video of a conversation, for example. Yeah, these aren't easy. These are not easy. So please spend time thinking, and please, please, please consult with me about what your plans are. I love helping, guiding, and discussing. So thank you, and happy planning.